Hello and welcome back. This is a continuation of a previous tutorial where I showed you how to set up a tenancy, charge a deposit and receive it. So what we're about to do now is manage the return of the deposit as well as the tenancy termination process. Now, picking up from where we last left, we received £1,000 which we put into the client bank account. If your deposit happens to reside in the client bank account, then you can simply skip the next section that I'm about to show you. But for the purpose of this tutorial, let's transfer the deposit to a virtual bank account that represents the deposit scheme, and we'll then go through the correct procedure to hand back the deposit, less any transfers to the landlord or deductions for any repairs that the tenant may be liable for. So back on the account screen, if we scroll down, we're going to go to the transfer report to see when the last bank transfer was made between our bank accounts. From the transfer report page, let's select a date range. So if we scroll down the list, we can see when the last bank transfer was made. So what we're looking out for is a transfer that was made from the client bank to the deposit account. Okay, let's go back up to the top to the account's main screen. And scrolling down, let's go to transfer funds. We'll now select the client bank, the deposit bank and the amount to transfer. So what we're doing now is making a virtual transfer from your bank to the deposit scheme. Now back on the accounts page, if we go to deposits held, tenants deposits held can be seen here. And if we go to the chart of accounts, we can also see the virtual bank transfer that was made. Okay, so that was deposits received and transferring it to the bank. Now let's go through the scenario of terminating a tenancy. So checking a tenant out is a two-step process. Step 1, you would go to notice to terminate tenancy, and step 2, it's terminate tenancy found here. So let's go through the first step, which is to give notice to terminate. Now going down to pro rata rent, this section lets you create a pro rata rent charge, for example if the tenant's going to overstay the contract duration. So in this case the tenancy ends on the 8th of the 2nd, but we're going to specify that the tenant's going to vacate on the 15th. Now let's click to charge pro rata rent, and you'll now see that the system has automatically raised the rent charge for the 7 days. And the section here lets you book an inventory inspection for the checkout. Okay, so that was step 1. We can see a visual confirmation that the tenant's given their notice to leave. So we'll now go on to step 2, which is to terminate the tenancy. Right, scrolling down to the deposit section, and we can see here that £1,000 deposit is held. Now before handing back the deposit, there are two ways of making a deduction from the deposit. One is to make a transfer to the landlord, which would simply credit the landlord's account and debit the tenant's account. And the other way is to apply a charge which will affect our income account. So entering £100 here will leave £900 to be returned to the tenant, and the landlord will be credited by £100. Now let's look at the second option, which is to apply a charge to the tenant. Now before pressing the save button, let's just quickly recap on what we've done. We've marked the deposit as refundable and we've made some deductions. Now there's another step to the process, which is now to make a payment from your bank back to the tenant. So if we go back to the letting section, and on the left menu, let's go to ended tenancies. Now we'll go to the tenant's accounts. We can see here that when we mark the deposit as refundable, it's moved it from the deposit held account to the tenant's main account. So the next step from here is to make a payment, and that's how we will make a payment from our bank back to the tenant. Now choose the bank where the deposit is being returned from. Okay, if we go back to the accounts overview and drill down into the main account, We'll now see the initial deposit that was transferred from the deposit account, less any cleaning fees, and the final amount that was returned back to the tenant. Now let's finalise by seeing a breakdown of the deposit held account to see what's gone on in there. Down the bottom here we can see the holding fees that were received, the remaining deposit, and then the transfer that was made back to the tenant's main account to return to the tenant, less any fees and charges. Now the method I've showed you to return a deposit is via the Terminate Tenancy screen, and that page gives you all the steps to make it easy for you. But you can use the return deposit function found on the tenant's account's main page, found down the bottom, and what that will do is simply transfer the funds from the deposit held account to the main account, and you will then manually make any deductions and transfers before finally making a payment.